So first of all, thank you so much everyone for joining us for this very special town hall. We're so grateful to see so many of you joining us today and to see so many members of the community come together, from families to supporters. We've got industry folks, the medical community, truly from all over the world. So thank you so much for making the time. For this month's town hall, we're here to talk about innovative approaches to EB care. To discuss this from a range of perspectives, we're honored to be joined today by Nathan Burmeister, EB Dad and Chair of EBRP Australia, as well as Dr. Allison Cowin, Professor of Regenerative Medicine at the University of South Australia. You'll hear about the Burmeister family's journey with EB and how the way that they care for their son Jacob has evolved. It's also his birthday today, so shout out Jacob. You'll also hear from Dr. Cowin on the groundbreaking research that she and her team are working on to change the future of EB and rare disease at large. To provide a bit of an overview of the format for today, we just ask that everyone please stay on mute to respect our amazing speakers. We're going to save questions for our Q&A session more towards the end. And while we're going to prioritize those questions that were pre-submitted when you RSVP'd, we'll, of course, as always, do our best to answer as many outstanding questions via personal email follow-up afterwards. So feel free to keep the questions coming. We've got a lot this month, but pop them in the chat as they arise, or if you prefer to send them more privately, you can direct those to Margot Sosa on our team here. So before I pass it over to our wonderful speakers, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about EBRP's mission for those of you who might be a bit more new to us and truly highlight the global nature of our work. So EBRP was founded in 2010 with one big, bold, audacious goal, and that is to treat and cure EB as quickly as possible and to use that to pioneer a path for the 10,000 plus other rare diseases, 95% of which have no approved treatments. EBRP is the largest global nonprofit funding research to treat and cure EB, and since our inception, we're proud to say that we've raised over $70 million to fund more than 160 really innovative and promising EB research projects. This work has led to a complete transformation of the EB landscape, from 2 clinical trials when we started to now nearly 50, over half of which EBRP has directly funded, and of course from 0 treatments to 2 FDA-approved treatments in 2023 alone. Of course, these milestones and this momentum is super exciting and really, really would not be possible without so many of you present on this call today, but they are just stepping stones on our journey to our cure. They are not our final destination. And our team is more laser focused than ever on delivering that cure. And to achieve this, we need to continue to fund and to accelerate the most innovative EB research around the world. And we really do mean around the world. EBRP has funded research in over 10 countries, including the US, Canada, Mexico, India, Ireland, the UK, France, Germany, Chile, of course, Australia, and more. Additionally, in 2020, as some of you may or may not know, we formalized a partnership with an Australian EB research organization that became EB Research Partnership Australia. They leverage our competitive grant approval process, our world-renowned scientific advisory board, as well as our innovative venture philanthropy business model to increase impact and to truly work around the clock to find a cure for EB. It's been an incredible couple of years with a lot of growth, and we're so honored to have so many of our Aussie friends here joining us today. So with that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our amazing speakers. We're so honored to be joined by Nathan Burmeister, an incredible EB dad who has traveled the world to find the very best care for his son Jacob. Nathan's steadfast determination and his relentless advocacy for his son and for his community are just a few of the many, many reasons why he's such an amazing leader in this space and why we're so honored to have him as the chair of EB Research Partnership Australia. Also with us today, of course, is Dr. Allison Cowin, a renowned researcher in the EB space and professor of regenerative medicine at the University of South Australia. Dr. Cowin's passion for the EB community is unparalleled and has led her to work on accelerating not just one, but multiple EB projects with her team. We also have a very special guest with us today, Jason McCartney from the GWS Giants, who I'll let Nathan properly introduce a bit later on, but thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. And so thanks again for waking up early to our Aussie folks to join us and for taking the time today. And with that, Nathan, it's my pleasure to pass it on over to you.
Thanks very much, Allison. It's not that early for most of us. Perhaps if you're on the West Coast, it's quite early, but it's 9 a.m. here. Firstly, a little bit about my family. So we're a family of 4 plus a dog. We come from Melbourne, Australia. Although today I'm joining you, was stuck in traffic here on business in Hobart, Tasmania. I have a daughter. We have a daughter, 6 years old. She does not have EB. And a son, Jacob, who, yes, it's his third birthday today, which is exciting, and looking forward to get home to spend some more time with him. And then last but definitely not least, my wife, Lauren, who recently we celebrated our 10 years anniversary together. Today, what I wanted to talk about is a bit about Jacob. What EB is for him. For those in the community, EB is quite unique to each individual, and certainly his is quite unique. The role I've taken on with EBRP, and a bit about what we're up to in Oz. And then, something I've really enjoyed about these forums is the learning I've gotten from other parents and researchers, and I'd like to see if I could give back a little bit. As much as I appreciated that introduction from Allison, yes, I've traveled the world. I've still got lots to learn, and there's plenty of parents probably on this call with decades more experience, but I'll share what I've learned and enjoy a bit of question time at the end. So our experience and Jacob's life. So that's my little boy. He has recessive dystrophic and quite a severe subtype. So for him, his whole body is impacted. I think for some people it can be limited to hands and feet. For him, where the blisters occur is between the epidermis and the dermis, which is what dystrophic is. And recessive, that part of it basically means my wife and I had no idea this was coming. There was some hidden nasty genes in both of us that we didn't know about. And then upon meeting, we had a 1 in 4 chance of having a kid like Jacob. So, but the overall chance is more like 1 in a million. Would never take that back. We love our beautiful boy, but he was quite a surprise. So for him, he's got one particular chronic wound on the left leg that's been painful for him and hard for us because it just won't heal, and as a result, he doesn't walk. And he does need continuous feeding, so he doesn't eat. Basically because he's scared to, because he knows the impact. And in terms of some things that are unique to him, although there are others in the world with this, he has quite bad stomach discomfort and vomiting as something he needs to deal with. And then, like many, his fingers are a challenge in that there's contractures and fibrosis and a little bit of webbing. So all of this actually, whilst is hard to talk about, is also very motivating day by day when you see your child going through all this. Something I found interesting at a conference recently in Austria that probably many of you in the community attended was this slide here talking about what you can expect along the journey. And it's probably hard to accept, particularly when your child is young, but I found it very beneficial to think about these different symptoms that can appear along the way. And the reason for that is you can plan for it. So this graph here is just showing you with Jacob's particular recessive dystrophic subtype, when you can expect different conditions to occur. And for the general audience here, I guess this slide also shows you that EB is just so much more than a skin disease. You've probably heard often before that your skin doesn't bind together, the glue doesn't work, you get blisters easily, and that's painful. But that's actually for recessive dystrophic Jeb, and probably Kinder, that there's a lot more going on actually that make EB very destructive. So one example of that is the eyes. So Jacob luckily only has eye sensitivity at the moment. We have not had corneal erosion or ablation, although I hear that is perhaps one of the most painful things these kids go through. So knowing that is a potential of his future has actually helped us. We've talked to people around the world. He's getting investigated for any scarring, and then may end up wearing preventative eye lenses, which I think is, you're better off trying to plan for that stuff early if possible. All of that might not work, but I found that helpful to know what might be in his future, at least his short-term future, because I'm hoping that long-term stuff is not in his future. Next slide, please. These are our goals, which might just show you what it's like being an EB parent if you're not. So for this year, we have really the first two are our main simple goals. We just like him to walk and participate, try something to eat. Our expectation is not that he'll eat normally, but that he'll at least try some nice foods. For those who have heard me talk before, you might know that Jacob's favorite show is Peppa Pig. And one of the saddest things for me is that he's always talking about ice cream because in Peppa Pig, that's an exciting thing, but he's never actually tried one. So I really look forward to that day. We'd really love Jakey's left leg to heal to give him some reprieve there and be able to walk, and we'd love his nights to be a bit easier. So that's what we're trying to achieve this year. So what's my role and also what drew me to EBRP? EBRP is an organization that's quite focused on simply a mission to cure EB. And, from the time Jacob was born, I was drawn to some of the content from EBRP and the hope, really, that EBRP were providing and still provide today. And it's a mission I quickly wanted to get on board with and use my skills as best possible to help. So I'm a co-founder of an engineering firm. There's a few of my colleagues on this call today called FSC. My career spanned about 15 years. I've managed quite significant teams for engineering firms here in Australia. I'm trying to bring some of my, problem solving and analytical skills as well as business skills to EBRP. So what is the future of EB from an EBRP and our perspective? I do like the fact that it is that single mutation, although for those that don't know, there are 17, I believe, different mutations across the spectrum of what EB is. EB is quite a broad disease in that respect, but each one is just one single gene mutation. We already have 2 FDA treatments, both of which we're hoping soon in Australia, both of which you can get through what's called a special access scheme here. But neither of which are actually approved just yet through our equivalent of the FDA, which is the TGA. We have a record high level of research globally at the moment. So from an EBRP perspective, we've funded over 150 research projects, but there's a lot more than that. And there's some really exciting science out there. As far as where we're at in the disease state, we're quite mature. And there's lots of opportunity to actually now take drugs to market, which is very exciting, and more science to go as well. And the next 2 points, a lot of that research, luckily, is targeted at recessive dystrophic and JEB, which are quite devastating. We really do believe that EB could be cured by 2030, maybe not drugs in your hand, but a solution known by 2030. And that's when Jacob is 8. So next slide, please. A little bit about our team. We've evolved a lot. So we have a fantastic board here spread throughout Australia with different skills. Mr. Jonathan Brown should still soon be joining our board. I don't know if he's on the call today, which is very exciting. So most of you might not know who that is, but he's a famous Australian footballer. And in addition to that, we've got GWS as an ambassador. So from a recognition and actually raising awareness point of view, I think we're on the right track. I took a lot of inspiration in Austria last year with Michael Hundenrich and Allison when we went over, that a lot of folks in Austria, and I mean a lot, like more than 80%, apparently, appear to know what EB is, and that is just outstanding. And we're nowhere near those levels, I think, in the US or Oz. But we're working towards that because, of course, with great awareness comes fundraising, and fundraising hopefully comes a cure. We have a board of about 5 and a team that has recently expanded with Mr. Dan McKernan, now based in Adelaide, as our head of philanthropy. Yep. Next slide. So last year we did a round of plunges here in Australia. So that hadn't happened before in Oz. We did a little bit of a twist on it, which we'll do again this year because I guess the whole point of the plunge for Ality that was set up over in the States by the Cubics was to hop in some freezing cold water and maybe experience for a short moment what it's like to be uncomfortable with EB. At the time of year they do that, it is really balmy and warm in Australian waters. So we tried to put a spin on it, and we dressed up as superheroes. In fact, Iron Man in that photo there is Jacob's lovely doctor, Dr. Tom Connell. You can see Brownie there in his ice bath with a couple of GWS players at the plunge in Adelaide. And Jacob's care team actually on the bottom left, all dressed up as superheroes. And yeah, the kid himself up the top right. Other significant events we held last year, perhaps the most special was a release of an EB film that we'd been working on for quite some time, involving many members of the EB community here in Australia, and with a lot of help of Deborah Australia to organise that lovely film. So we released that at a nice antique theatre, and paid and had all the EB families come down and enjoy their own premiere, and just used it as an opportunity to raise awareness and get the community together. And it was a really fantastic event. Next slide, please. We also did some work around the Gather Round to raise awareness. So for those on this call from Australia, you might recognise a few of the faces in the bottom left. This was a very special event for us because we managed to raise quite a significant amount of money in this one single event that's gone towards getting Vyjuvek into the country here in Australia. And that, whilst it's not here yet, we do have a very solid plan and pathway for it to get here, largely due to the efforts of the Royal Children's Hospital, for which I'll be forever grateful. Next slide. So coming up, if you are in Oz, we are doing the plunges again. They are a lot of fun for quite little effort. You really just sign up and it's peer-to-peer fundraising. So yeah, if you're in Melbourne, Sydney, Mornington Peninsula or Adelaide, please get around it. We should have something coming out on socials very shortly about these events. So a bit about what I've learnt, and this is really focused on families on this call and patients. I loved this slide, which I've stolen from John McGrath in the UK. He presented this in Austria last year, and specifically for those with recessive dystrophic, he's written this sort of, what would you be asking your doctor for, or what might you be hinting at your clinician that you'd like to try? And I should caveat at this point that the stuff I'm talking about, I'm certainly not a medical expert, and it's just my opinion. And yeah, anything I'm suggesting here would also need to be verified by a physician. But what I do strongly believe, and I've learnt in my journey, is that you're your own best advocate or your child's best advocate. And so, we've had a lot of benefit from trying to look around the world at where some of the cutting edge research is and where maybe other centers around the globe are experimenting and getting success out of, say, drugs that are not yet approved in EB or approved in other areas that are showing great success in EB, or even experimental drugs that are well studied. So this was a bit of a cheeky stab, I think, at Crystal Biotech or maybe the government, but in the UK they can't get Vyjuvek, nor can you pretty much anywhere else but the US at the moment. So there's a big can't get it over that. But obviously Vyjuvek would be the number one thing you'd want. And then there's some other tips beyond that. Now, I won't read all those out, but feel free to take a screenshot. Maybe the one I'll quickly talk to is losartan, in that a dad actually put me onto this from the UK that I get along with very well. And losartan is actually a blood pressure medication that may help with fibrosis in fingers. And so what the study showed is that it could have a lot more benefit if applied early in life. And, you probably won't find out about that unless you push your doctor for it, or unless you're in an area of the world where they are at the cutting edge. So I do highly suggest that those sorts of things are talked about, and that you sort of encourage your physician, if they have no idea what you're talking about, to look it up and dig into the research themselves in case it's of benefit to you. Another thing we've learnt on the journey is that we've done our best to just not let EB define who we are. EB is definitely part of our life. We don't shy away from it. We fight it. We tackle it. But we've tried to implement some rules that help us so that it doesn't just dominate all parts of life and our daughter and our son and all of our mental well-being. So, for example, we try to make our dressing room, which is utilized from 8 till midday every day, a games room with EB sort of packed away, if you like, after that point. We ask our care team not to talk about EB with us after 8 p.m. because for us, we're talking about that a good majority of our day, and it can get exhausting. So that's something we implemented just to get a bit of separation. But probably the main thing we implemented is trying not to have dressings and other things laying around the house, so that we can feel somewhat normal in our space. I'm going to get a bit specific here, and I'm going to go quickly because I'm happy to make these slides available. So zinc and castor oil cream is a fantastic combo. This is probably a fairly basic and normal one that people know, but it's an excellent preventative barrier. I'm going to go quick through this, Allison. On the bottom there, you can see some things Jacob's using. I'm just being very transparent. Vyjuvek, not just yet, but hopefully soon. Gentamicin has worked very well for him. Could be because he has a nonsense mutation and it's providing read-through qualities. Could also be because it's an antibiotic and it's cleaning the wound, but it's working. And then for Lucivez or Filcivez, we've actually stopped using it. It did help, maybe 5% or so, certainly with his inflammation. But gentamicin for him is actually working better. Some different cleaning products we use. Probably like many parents and patients, we've found that a clean wound goes a long way to providing quicker healing. Just on that topic too, we've found nanobaths to be, which was introduced to me actually by the Cubics, nanobaths, which introduce very, very small bubbles in the bath, to be an excellent way not only to debride the skin, but to clean the wound bed. But these products here are sort of an antimicrobial, and we use different products, different types of antimicrobials. And since doing that quite regularly, I've actually had very little infection in Jacob, which is exciting. We're getting to more benign but interesting products here that do help a little bit. Aquaphor on the bottom left is hugely popular in the US, but not outside of the US, because there's a program there where folks can get it at a discount. We buy it on Amazon and we love it. It's got lanolin in it, like a sheep extract. And that, assuming you're not allergic to lanolin, which many folks are, it's a very good product to help wounds heal once they're already closed over. We use lots and lots of urea for dry skin that needs, quite a significant moisturizer. And then on the right is the current normal moisturizer we're experimenting with. This one is definitely a prescription drug. So for those who have chronic wounds or experience with that, like Jacob, he gets lots of granulation. Wounds are meant to heal from the outside coming in, and granulation can stop that. And we've found a little bit of use of steroids to help with that, but you do have to be careful because it can thin the skin. I actually dressed up in Jacob's dressings. You can see that on the top right. It's embarrassing, but it was really useful. These are the things I found through that process. Like, I think temperature and comfort is a big one. Obviously, if your child's talking to you, a lot of this is perhaps not relevant, but I did this at a time where Jacob was not talking to me. I wanted to know, does a sticky dressing straight on the wound cause discomfort? What's the dressing like under the armpits and so on? And so these are all the different things I learned undertaking that process. That thing on the bottom right there is a picture of his skinnies, which we order from the UK. We find that if you can apply some sort of compression garment anywhere around the body, ideally everywhere, it goes a long way to stop dressings moving. Uh, that might be it. That's my beautiful little boy. So another topic that I think will be familiar to some is the what we call the sibling dilemma at home. Um, Unavoidably, Jacob's needs are just so much more than Hannah's needs, and it's something we're trying to be really attentive with. And actually, I would take tips from the audience on this. But some things that we've tried to do is, for example, the care team, if someone's up before us, and the kids are up, which is not too uncommon. Jacob might be getting his, cocktail of drugs in the morning, which can be 20 or so drugs slowly injected into him. And, meanwhile, Hannah's watching TV or doing nothing and asking for breakfast. And so we've tried to make it that, well, okay, whilst that's critical, Jacob can wait, try our best to treat Hannah's needs on par, because naturally Jacob just needs a lot more care than Hannah does, and it can be quite unfair. The other thing I've observed is even at like events, we'll go to an event and everybody, particularly fundraising events, gives Jacob a whole bunch of attention, and we do wonder what that does for Hannah's psychology. So this is one that we're acutely aware of, given the young age of these children. Yeah, I mentioned the amazing support of GWS Giants. They wore our logo on the bottom of their shorts. You can see in the top right photo all year round, which is just fantastic for advocacy. So, is that the end there, Allison? I would love to now hand over to somebody who I really respect and have enjoyed getting to know, Mr. Jason McCartney. Jason is the operations manager for GWS Giants, so has a day-to-day on the ground role, coaching, hiring staff, and so on. But we met through obviously this GWS partnership with EBRP, but Jason has a story that is very unique in that he, and I'll let him tell it in more detail, but he went through an event that caused third-degree burns and long times in hospital, and through sheer grit and determination got himself back into operating mode and even played a game of footy. And I just have so much respect for that. And I think probably a person who might, though it's impossible to fully empathize, might come somewhat close to empathizing with what it's like to have EB. So it's my pleasure to hand over to Jason. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for those kind words. And also, please pass on our love and best wishes to Jacob on his third birthday today. So, yeah, look, as Nathan mentioned throughout, the awareness is a big piece. So I'll talk a little about us as a club and my experiences and where it all fits in. But I, for one, was probably like many Australians and really had a lack of awareness around EB probably 12 to 14 months ago. But through this wonderful partnership we've had as a football club with the foundation, the awareness for our people in the club and our players has been so significant and so profound because it allows us, and the vehicle we are in Australia is AFL. So we're one of 18 teams in a national competition that arguably is the biggest sporting code in the country, with viewership, membership, and attendance. So this partnership ambassador we have, and the vehicle and the spotlight on our club and our players week in, week out, gives us an opportunity to play just a small role in creating that awareness and hopefully helping. Obviously, what we're all here about is finding a cure for EB. So my introduction would have been at the gather round, which Nathan mentioned earlier, the luncheon there, which would have been back in April last year. And I had the pleasure, I met Nathan, and I was there a little bit later, and we got talking, and I was sharing some of my experiences. And I was very fortunate that Jacob came back with his carers. So I had the pleasure to meet Jacob. So whilst I will never have a full understanding of what Jacob and others go through with this, I do sympathise in a small way because, as Nathan touched on, I unfortunately suffered third-degree burn injuries back in 2002. Mine was a bit unique because of the circumstances. I was actually in a bar in Bali, Indonesia, and was caught up in a cowardly terrorism attack where a suicide bomber was in the bar that myself and a couple of friends were in, only 5 meters from us, and detonated the first of what was about 3 or 4 blasts that night. So, yeah, prior to that, very obvious. I had no understanding of, burn injuries and the significance and the trauma, and I suppose the long-lasting effect and how long with a burn injury it takes to recover. So when I was talking to Nathan at that event that night, there were some similarities, and looking at the presentation before, the garments and the creams. So I had multiple operations and skin grafts. I was pretty fortunate. I had a week in a coma. I was pretty fortunate to get out of hospital inside a month, where they thought it was more likely to be about 3 months. But beyond that, just I suppose the daily treatment. Fortunate for me being an adult, probably for kids with burns and the discomfort, and obviously you have these skin grafts as a burn patient, but as a kid, you obviously ongoing multiple operations. I didn't have that, but those pressure garments I wore for 12 months to help with the overall healing process. So some of the treatment, there were some similarities. So I suppose in a small way, I had the smallest insight, but my heart goes out to Nathan and Jacob and so many others on this call for the daily treatment and what goes into that. But this is what we're all about, and the partnership with the Giants is obviously, like I said, trying to help to get to where we all want to get to, in that goal of finding a cure for anyone suffering EB. So, like I said, our partnership, you can have partnerships with sporting organisations throughout, but this one means a lot, and it's really special, and it's about the connection piece. And our people, our players really care. So there's some slides up there now, whether it's been the school visits, obviously last year with Pearl Jam out, and one of the concerts here at our stadium, NG Stadium, was amazing. That Eddie Vedder took time out to really thank our club for the partnership, and it shone a bright light, not on us at the Giants really, but just on the opportunity ahead to really create that awareness. And like Nathan has touched on, and many others will, with that awareness provides the opportunity to raise funds that can go into the research that's required. So we love the partnership. We're really excited that partnership is continuing this year. Our players, and right from our CEO to the top, all the way through, love the opportunity to spend time with this group, with this foundation, and in any way that we can continue to try and make a difference to help, we certainly will. So thank you. I'm sure there's probably plenty of questions a little bit later on, but yeah, just thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. Our season's about to kick off Sunday week for us, so we're full on in preparation mode with a practice game in Canberra happening this Friday. So the season's upon us again, and we look forward to our players continually to shine the spotlight on EB and the research that's going on, so we can achieve that ultimate goal of finding a cure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. I have a feeling you've got a lot more Giants fans on the call after that. So I'm glad that you could introduce us and share a bit more for those who might have been a bit newer to that conversation. So thank you so much to Nathan as well, and Jason, for just the impact and the awareness that you've been able to achieve for everyone battling EB in Australia, of course, but really around the world is so incredible and unbelievable. We're so grateful to know you and get to work with you both. And so with that, it's now my pleasure to pass it on over to Dr. Cowin.
Thank you, Allison. So I'm really happy today to be able to talk to you all about some of the work that we're doing here in South Australia. Next slide, please. So my research is based at the Future Industries Institute at the University of South Australia, and I lead a really talented group of wound healing researchers who have been focusing a lot on trying to develop new technologies, new wound therapeutics, new dressings that could be used for the treatment of EB, but also other wounds as well. So a lot of what we do has many applications. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to tell you about today is about the systemic antibody therapy that we are developing at the moment, focusing that on EB. And it's all based on a protein that we identified over 20 years ago now, called flightless. And flightless has a really strange name, but it was first identified in flies, and by mutating this protein, the flies lost their ability to fly. But we've been working on this protein now, and we know that this does so much more than just make flies fly. It actually is really important in helping cells to be able to move, to be able to proliferate, to be able to migrate, and all of those are integral to helping a wound to heal well. So we've done a lot of studies with many different people over the years and shown that in different human wounds, we know that flightless is present, is upregulated, but when it's present for very high levels and left there for a very long time, then it actually impairs that process. So particularly in people with diabetic wounds that fail to heal, for venous leg ulcers that fail to heal, for EB patient wounds that fail to heal, we know that there is very high levels of this protein. And we also have done a lot of work understanding the mechanism of how it works. And we know that it increases inflammation, and that this high level of inflammation that, if left unresolved, causes the problems associated with high levels of flightless. Next slide, please, Alison. So what we've done is knowing all of that, and I'm not able to go into all the detail today, but I'm just going to tell you how we are approaching reducing the level of this protein within the wound so that we can actually develop a therapeutic that can actually improve healing responses. So the approach that we took was to develop an antibody, and an antibody is really just a protein that is very, very unique and very specific to targeting that protein. And this protein and this antibody is able to bind to flightless and neutralize its activity. So we developed these flightless neutralizing antibodies, and we're able to, and this schematic just shows how we are thinking that it works, in that the flightless in the blue balls is present in the wounds, and then we come in with our antibody that can actually neutralize it and mop it up. Next slide. So we've done a lot of work in many different animal models to be able to show that when we apply the antibody to the surface of the skin, either in a gel, in a cream, or in a injection, just into the surface of the skin, that we can actually improve the healing of those wounds. And we've done this in porcine skin. So pig skin is the most similar skin to humans, and it's expected by the FDA to actually show that your product works within a model that is very similar to human skin before you can get FDA approval to move it into patients. And we've also shown this in mice with normal healing wounds, mice with burn wounds, and mice with diabetic wounds. And in all cases, when we treat the surface of the skin, these wounds, topically with the antibody, we can improve healing responses. Next slide. But, we're obviously really, really interested in EB, and working with Professor Dede Morel, who is a leading dermatologist in Australia who works with many EB patients here, we were able to get samples from different types of EB, such as simplex, junctional, and recessive dystrophic EB. And in all cases, when we looked at for the level of flightless in those patient samples, in those blistered areas, in those wounds, we saw huge levels of this protein present. So we were able to develop an EB mouse model using our we have genetic mice that overexpress or underexpress our flightless protein, and we were able to induce EB in those mice. And what we were able to show was with this mouse model, when those mice had very high levels of flightless, that they had much more severe blistering, and that's shown in the panel on the right. And this work was done by Thakur Kopecki when he was a postdoc in my group. Next slide. And what we were then able to do was to apply the antibody in a cream vehicle to the surface of the skin and show that those blisters, those wounds on the backs of the mice, were much less severe when the antibody was able to reduce the level of flightless in the skin. Next slide. Importantly, when we applied the cream to blisters that had already been established, which is more similar to what would happen in an EB patient, we were able to reduce the amount of blistering and improve the healing responses. So this is all really positive and shows that application of an antibody to the surface of the skin, to the wound, can actually improve healing responses. Next slide, please. But I guess the question that we've been wondering about is a topical approach to EB really the best way to go? Because as Nathan's already described, EB is much more than just a surface skin problem. There's many more issues that occur systemically, particularly in the gut and as you heard earlier, in all parts of the body. So while we are developing this topical approach, developing different gels that can deliver the antibodies to the skin and developing various porous silicon nanoparticles, which are really clever ways to tailor and deliver antibody to the skin, we're also really interested now in developing a systemic antibody therapy. And that could then be targeted to actually treating both the internal and the external wounds at the same time. Next slide. So we also have some other EB mouse models. So we have the collagen 7 knockout mice, and these mice are really frail. They die within a few weeks, days of birth even, due to the blistering and the severe blistering they have because they have no collagen 7 protein. So when we treated these pups with our antibody, and just for an IP injection, we were able to double the lifespan of these mice, right from normally they would die, if you look at the graph in the middle, they normally die within 7 to 14 days, these pups. But when we gave them the antibody, we were able to maintain them out to at least 28 days when the experiment ended. And we were able to reduce the blistering of these mice, these pups as well. So that's our first indication that perhaps a systemic antibody therapy could be really important for EB. Next slide, please. And what we were also able to do was to give a labeled antibody, which has got a fluorescent dye attached to it, to those pups, and we're able to see where the antibody goes to. And if you can see in that left panel there, the antibody has actually gone to where the blisters were, to where the wounds were on the paws of the pup. So that's really important to show that just an injection into the body can actually then go to where the wounds are. Next slide. So another experiment that we've been doing recently is because EB mouse models are so challenging and so difficult to work with, we've been trying to develop a way that we can look at multiple wounds in different parts of the body at the same time in a more manageable mouse model. So what we've done, and this was work done by Dr. Chris Turner, was that we developed a mouse model that had a wound created on the backs of the mice, in the skin, but we also gave them a drug that caused damage to their colon and their bowel. So they were given DSS in their drinking water and then wounded at the same time. So we also injected them with the antibody on a daily basis in this particular trial, and we were able to see that after 7 days, we saw a significant improvement in the healing of the wounds on the surface of the skin through an injection into the body. So that's really exciting. And we also did a similar experiment with a labeled antibody that we injected into those mice, and we're able to show that that antibody was going to where the wounds were on the surface of the skin. Next slide. I think what we're most excited about is that that systemic antibody, when we looked at the damage to the gut, was able to almost completely reduce the amount of damage and the blistering that was seen inside the body. So to us, that's just amazing that we can actually have an injection of an antibody that can go and home to the wounds inside the body as well as on the surface of the skin. And the data there just shows that we've got a significant reduction in the disease activity index. So that's all the sort of markers of frailty and blood in the stools and things to show that the mice are not healthy. And then when we looked histologically at the gut, at the different points within the gut, we're able to see a significant reduction in severity of the blistering. So really exciting, really good news for this antibody therapy. Next slide. So I know many people always want to know when will we get to be able to use this new therapy, and what we're developing is called a first-in-class antibody therapy because it's never been done before. So there's never been an antibody that has been developed for the treatment of EB, and there's never been an antibody that's been injected systemically that can treat both internal and external wounds. So this is something that's really unique and really important. The process that we are now going through is that we have to humanize the antibody, which we are doing with the support of EB Research Partnership, which we are very grateful for, which means that we've actually now got a drug humanized antibody ready to go for IND listing and FDA approval for taken to humans. We've also got to do some safety and toxicity studies and various binding and affinity development, because we want to make sure that that antibody that we give, we want it to be able to be maybe given on a monthly basis. So we need to make sure that the antibody is as good at binding to the target as possible. So there's a few extra processes we need to go to fine tune that. But we are hopeful of being able to go into those phase 1-2 clinical trials within the next few years if we get the sufficient funding to be able to support our program right through to clinical trials. Next slide. So in my final few minutes, I just wanted to move away from my own group's research and tell you a little bit about a new initiative that's being developed in Australia within this Australian government system called a CRC program. And what we've been working on is called the SMART CRC, which stands for Solutions for Manufacturing Advanced Regenerative Therapies. So this is a really exciting initiative, and it's going to be a huge boost potentially for EB research in Australia. So we put in an application in 2024, went through all the various different stages through to interview in December. Nathan came along to that interview process and wowed the panel with his description of how important it is for us to be able to have a manufacturing of drugs for patients with EB in Australia. But we are still waiting for the minister to announce the successful bids, but we're keeping everything crossed that we will be one of those lucky CRCs that is supported by the government. Just to give you a little bit more information, next slide. What regenerative therapy, so this CRC is not just going to be focused on EB, but it's actually much broader than that, because we want to develop and manufacture therapies that will be able to treat cancer patients with CAR T-cell therapies. We want to be able to improve wound dressings. We want to improve implants and manufacture biologics. And we also want to develop better gene and cell therapies for rare diseases such as EB. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, Jacob was a star of our presentation, and what we know and what Nathan has talked to you today about is the fact that there are drugs on the market in America, in Europe, that we do not have in Australia. And we need to improve that sovereign manufacturing capability, which is what this CRC is all about. We want to be able to develop the research that is so good and done within the research laboratories within universities, but we don't want it just to stay in the universities. We want to be able to develop a centre that can actually help to translate that research through industry partnerships into clinical trials, into patients. And that's the gap at the moment, which doesn't happen very well, particularly here. So this CRC, if we're successful, we will really focus on developing that manufacturing capability to be able to progress all of that fantastic research in universities into patients. And EB Research Partnership has come in as a core partner, and we are really thrilled to have EBRP as part of the CRC program. The benefits for the CRC, it's a 10-year CRC. It involves research funding from the university sector, from industry sectors. We have 65 partners who have signed up and pledged their funding and their in-kind staff and non-kind in-staff contributions. And we have applied for 65 million from our Commonwealth funding body to be able to set up this CRC. And if successful, we will train a workforce that is going to be so much better at manufacturing, so much better at doing research, so much bigger and broader than what we currently have here. We're going to be able to improve our sovereign manufacturing capability, which we learned through COVID. We do not want to be in the stage where we were when we had COVID, waiting for the rest of the world to develop the vaccines to be able to treat the people in Australia. So we need to improve that. And we expect that if this CRC is successful, we will be able to see economic benefits and, importantly, a reduced healthcare burden by the development of cures for treating patients such as Jacob and other people with other conditions in Australia. So please keep your fingers crossed. We're really hopeful that we will be successful, and we hope to be able to update you in the future on where the Smart CRC is. Thank you, Alison. That's all for me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cowin. Your work and your team are just absolutely remarkable, and it's so exciting to hear about this progress. So thank you so much. We're gonna move on to the Q&A portion of our discussion today. Just as a quick reminder, we're gonna prioritize those pre-submitted questions. There were actually quite a lot of them, more than ever before this month. So first of all, thank you all for your energy and for your questions. But don't worry if we don't get to your question right now. You're gonna get a personal follow-up from someone on our team via email, making sure you get an answer to your question. So Nathan, the first question is to you. This person says, I myself am not personally affected by EB, but I want to get involved and do what I can do to help. As an EB dad, Nathan, from your perspective, what is the most helpful thing someone like me could do?
Well, that's a great question. There's a great little saying in fundraising that, you know, if you can't give, can you get? And you know, and what I mean by that is, you know, ideally the most impactful thing you probably do is donate or get donations. And so I think one of the easiest ways to help out is to do a plunge, either by yourself and raise money from friends and family and people you know to get in some ice water, or if you want, go bigger and get a group of family and friends to go do that and raise money through a peer-to-peer platform. If that's of interest, hit up Allison. She'll be happy to set up a plunge page for anyone anywhere in the world. It's a very flexible fundraising option. But failing that, I think awareness is another thing that you can help with just by spreading the word about what this is, telling some family and friends, getting more people around the cause.
Thank you so much, Nathan. And he's absolutely right. If you want to start a plunge, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We've got a lot of help and resources on our team, and we can help you get that off the ground. So thank you for the plunge plug. I always love that. Dr. Cowin, this one's for you. When did you first get involved with EB work, and what, if anything, inspired or motivated you to do so?
Oh, it's a good question, because I've been doing wound healing research almost 30 years, and it's only really in the last 20 that I actually found out about EB. So for somebody even in the field, I didn't know much about EB, but I went to a conference and I heard from one of Day Morell's registrars. He was giving a presentation, a case study on a baby with junctional EB. And I was just taken by the pictures of that I was seeing of this poor baby. And being a young mum at the time, I just felt that I had to be able to do something to be able to do that. You know, as a wound researcher, there had to be something that I could do. So I immediately contacted Day. We got together, we set up a program of research. I just went from there onwards and just have been involved ever since. And it's something that I'm really pleased to be trying to do something about, because I think we can make such a difference to people with EB.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing and for being such a force in this space. Nathan, question to you. This person is asking, you've traveled the world to learn about the best care for Jacob, and thank you for sharing what you've learned. Is there anything you found that you haven't been able to bring home with you? And for those of us who might be in a similar situation, how do we even begin to advocate for access to a product or treatment or service like that?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. What can't I bring home? Well, I can't bring home the American insurance system, health insurance system, which, you know, that and the Orphan Drug Act is what drives such amazing innovation like Vyjuvek. So I can't bring that home, and probably can't yet bring home something as impressive as the EB House in Austria, which is probably a world-leading clinical research center amongst other things for EB. But yeah, what you can do is start to advocate for things like that. So in Australia, we have one payer, and this is quite common around the world. What that means is instead of multiple insurers paying for expensive drugs like BVEC, we've got one payer. And so that one payer has to pay for all all of the population. And so the price they pay is of high importance to them, and it's a strong negotiation. What can you do as the advocate? You can make said approval bodies aware of the dire need for the drug. So in our case, that's PBAC. You can do some work to raise awareness. Here that would be perhaps marching to Parliament. And one of the things we would like to do once Jacob is treated is hope, if that works, and the global data shows that it should, show that physically what Jacob's treatment looks like compared to someone who may not have Vyjuvek, and do so, in a setting to put pressure on politicians to get funding approved quickly. Just like things take a long time to go through the FDA in Australia, things take a long time to go through, even if it's already approved by the FDA, through our regulatory body, and more importantly, our funding body, PBAC. And so I think it takes advocacy and awareness with key decision makers, pressure really, to make sure that they're not just slowly ticking boxes, that they're moving quickly, understanding that EB kids like Jacob don't have time to waste.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for sharing. And just to be conscious of everyone's time here, we'll move on to our last question of this session. But like I said, if we didn't get to yours, no worries at all. Feel free to even keep popping things in the chat as they come to you. We'll make sure to get your answers after this town hall. So last question to you, Dr. Cowin. What, if any, other work in EB is the University of South Australia doing?
Oh, thank you. We have quite a broad research program, and we're also developing cell-based wound dressings for the treatment of wounds, and we've just completed a clinical trial with some of those dressings at the moment. And we're also interested in developing cell-free, so secretome-based wound gels, which the EBRP is helping us to fund at the moment. And also there's a very strong wound infection research program that happens at UniSA, which is also looking at trying to find different ways to combat antimicrobial resistance and develop different approaches to treat wound infection, as well as a research program led by Chris Turner, who is also funded by EBRP, to help to reduce itch, because we recognise that itch is incredibly difficult for EB patients. So he's got a really good program of research happening at the moment to combat that. So there's a wide range of different things that we're doing, and we won't stop until we actually can do something to improve EB, to improve the lives of the EB patients.
Incredible. Thank you so much. So for everyone on this call, how can we support, these life-saving efforts that we heard about today and really accelerate EBRP's mission? Luckily, we've got a couple of ways. So firstly, if you're a researcher or a scientist in the EB space or a similar space, like for example, as Dr. Cowin has talked about, the wound care space, and you're working on something either that could directly improve the quality of life for someone living with EB, or you think that what you're working on could translate well to EB, we want to hear from you, and we're actually currently accepting research applications to be considered for funding in our current grant cycle. So if you'd like to learn more, we'll have someone on our team pop a link in the chat, but you can visit ebresearch.org/apply for a grant and find out a bit more about our guidelines and our process. We'd love to look at your application. Secondly, as many of you may know, Rare Disease Day is this Friday, February 28th. This is a day to celebrate those battling rare disease, remember those that we've lost, and to really just spread awareness and education. We've heard just how vital that is today, so that rare disease warriors know that they don't face this battle alone, and so that we can achieve our ultimate goal of a cure. So we're going to be putting out some different stories and content and campaigning around Rare Disease Day. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. You can follow us on social media to make sure you see the really beautiful and powerful stories that we're so fortunate to be able to share throughout this week. And lastly, our next town hall is going to be the last week of March. We just finalized that date today. That'll be March 25th, the Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'd love to have all of you join us again if you're able to. This is going to be a really, really amazing discussion with community leader and all-around superstar Jordan Eves, pictured here with her husband Jake, along with some really amazing doctors and researchers who are working on treatments for junctional EB specifically. So we'll drop that RSVP link in the chat, and we hope to see you there. With that, just thank you all again so much to everyone who joined on this call and to our incredible speakers as well for taking the time to share what you've shared today. We hope everyone will continue to join us, so make sure you follow us on social media and that you're signed up for our newsletter to get updates on future town halls. But like I said, our next one will be in March and we really hope to see you there. Thanks again, everyone, and I hope you all have an amazing night.